today we're going to talk about the direct entry employer-sponsored 186 visa. Now, this visa, when granted, allows you to live, work and study in Australia. You can sponsor your dependent family members as well, or include them in the application. And yes, of course, it is permanent residency. So you're allowed to stay in Australia indefinitely. And then when you do qualify, you can apply for Australian citizenship. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tracy Chen and I'm the principal lawyer at Mason Chen Law Group. I'll drop our contact details below. So if you would like a consultation with myself or one of our fabulous lawyers or migration agents, you can contact us in the link below. We assist with all sorts of visa applications to Australia, everything ranging from general skilled immigration to employer sponsored, to tourist visas, to student visas, you name it. Anything visa and citizenship related. We also work on complex matters. So for example, if a health waiver for your application is required, or even tricky things like visa cancellations. I also have mini courses which are available for you for free or to purchase depending on what the course is and what's included in it. The website is below. You can just jump in, create a profile and have access to all my exclusive courses. Now, as you guys know, Australian migration changes a lot. So do remember to stay subscribed to our website where we send out updates whenever there are changes, as well as my socials, Instagram and TikTok. I always keep you guys updated on any Australian migration changes. So without further ado, let's get stuck into this 186 visa. Now, first of all, you can apply for this visa whether you're outside of Australia or inside of Australia. You must hold a substantive visa or a bridging visa A, B or C. Now, obviously, if you're outside of Australia, you will not be granted a further bridging visa to stay in Australia while it gets processed. If you are in Australia, then you will be eligible for a bridging visa, depending on what visa you held prior. That will allow you to stay in Australia while this 186 visa gets processed. Now, processing times can range anywhere between 4 months to I think 14 months, so a bit over a year. Now, this is direct entry and it must be sponsored by your employer. Now, I won't talk about specific employer requirements today. We're just looking at the requirements for the visa applicant themselves. I will do a separate video on employer requirements. That's more specific to your employer. That's something that they need to worry about, not yourself. But because it's employer sponsored, if you're not in Australia and your employer wants you to come to Australia to work, that does mean that this is not ideal probably, because your employer, if it takes 14 months, doesn't want to wait 14 months for you to arrive in Australia and start working. So most employers do the temporary skills shortage visa first, the 482, then they will look at the permanent resident visa. If you're in Australia and already working for them, then yeah, 186 direct entry is a great option. So first of all, what are the eligibility requirements for this visa? Now, this is just for the employee only. This is not relevant to the employer. So to be eligible, you first of all must have an occupation on the eligible occupation list. Now, I'll drop a link below, but it's known as the medium-term occupation list. So you must have an occupation on there to even be eligible for the 186 direct entry visa, direct to permanent residency. Occupations on there include registered nurses, solicitors, software engineers, as well as ICT business analysts. Look, there's quite a few occupations on there, but there are some occupations that are popular that aren't on there. So for example, cook is not on there, restaurant manager is not on there, as well as human resource advisor. Just a few from memory. So that means when a lot of you are asking me, oh yeah, my employer can sponsor me. Yes, potentially, maybe on the short-term stream, which doesn't lead to permanent residency, and it's not under this visa as well. So the long-term plan for this, employer sponsor is not recommended, only if it's on the medium-term occupation list. Now, you must have the relevant qualifications for this. For example, if you are a chef, you're usually required to have a diploma or higher. If you are a software engineer, you're required to have a Bachelor of Software Engineer or higher. Now, those qualifications don't need to be Australian, but they must be at the Australian level. So you would need your lawyer or migration agent to essentially check that for you. I'll give you an example. An accountant in Australia requires a 3-year bachelor and the core accounting subjects. There's like 7 core accounting subjects there. Had a couple of applicants who wanted to apply for 186 direct entry as an accountant. And when we checked their bachelor certificate, it was only 2 years. And when we check on our portal to see if it's equivalent to an Australian degree, we realized that it wasn't. It's equivalent equivalent to an associate degree. And obviously the big red flag there was that it was only a 2-year degree. So you must have the Australian equivalent. It's stated very clearly. You would definitely check on ANSCO for this to make sure you meet those specific requirements. So as important as always, you need to get proper legal and migration advice because everybody's situation is different. Now, yes, there are a lot of people who have done a bachelor degree or higher in accounting for 3 or 4 years, and that's fine. That's pretty straightforward, but it's still important for you to check. We always run checks. Then you must have 3 years of relevant work experience. That work experience must be post-qualification. So again, if we use accounting as an example, this applicant has done a 3-year bachelor degree in Australia. They started working full-time in Australia for 3 years post-qualification. They must be working at the required level. So clearly they must be working as an accountant. Accounts payable, accounts officer, those are not really accounting. If you look at the duties of accountant, it's very clear what they actually do. It's budgeting and forecasting, it's tax return, it's financial reports. It's not so much what we would call, clerical work. Another example I can give you is chef. So the applicant must have completed a diploma or higher. Usually it's like a certificate 3, 4 in commercial cookery and a diploma in hospitality. That's usually the Australian qualification. Overseas they call it diploma of culinary arts or culinary skills. Then after the degree, they start working full-time, 3 years full-time. And they must be working as a chef. So if you look at the ANSCO requirements of cook and chef, they're very different. So a cook does the cooking, takes instructions, and works in the team. The chef is the one who designs the menu, leads the kitchen, does a little bit of cooking as well, that's fine, but is the one who gives instructions to the cooks and the other kitchen hands. So essentially they are running the kitchen, different areas of the kitchen as well. So it's very different on what a chef and cook does. So it's very important that your work experience is relevant and at the required level. Now, I will talk about the documents required later, but we'll talk about this since we're on the topic of this. The 3 years full-time work experience is super important. It's really important that you have all the documents available. So we usually ask for a lot of payment evidence. From the top of my head, that would include payslips, bank statements that show the salary transfer, superannuation documents, or overseas it might be insurance documents. So I keep that as one. A reference letter from the employer, as well as a tax return. That's 5. And yes, we would usually ask for 5 because the department's really strict on this. If you don't have enough, you could get a request for further information on this. Now, you must have the relevant licensing, registration, or membership to actually work. So it depends on the occupation. In Australia, there are a lot of occupations that don't need relevant licensing or registration. But for example, if you're a doctor, then depending on what the occupation is, you definitely need to have the appropriate full registration with APRA. Same with a registered nurse, as well as same as a physiotherapist. You need to have the full registration with APRA. And you must have a positive skills assessment. So this is the tricky part. So this can be tricky for some occupations. However, most of the ones I can think of the medium term list, it's okay, it's relatively easy to get a skills assessment. The health occupations, obviously you may need to do extra studies or education to be able to get the full skills assessment. But yes, you would need a full skills assessment. So software engineer, you need your full assessment with Australian Computer Society. With chefs, you need your skills assessment through VetAssess or Trades Recognition Australia. For accountants, you need your skills assessment from CPA or IPA. Now, obviously for this position, you must be nominated. So you must have an employer who meets all their requirements, which I'll do in a separate video, to sponsor you in this position and nominate you essentially. And you must be of this age. So you need to be under 45 years old at the time of application. There are a few exemptions. So for example, if you're a university lecturer and you're nominated by an academic institution like a university, yeah. Or maybe if you're nominated as a scientist or a researcher and it's by an Australian specific government agency. So it's quite hard. We've had a few applicants in that sense, but obviously that's quite a high requirement. So rule of thumb is that you must have the relevant qualification, relevant 3 years post-qualification work experience, and a relevant and valid skills assessment. You must have competent English, which is equivalent to 6 in each band for IELTS, which I think is relatively easy. I think if you want to work in Australia and operate and live life, you probably need to have at least competent English. Most of our applicants can meet that requirement pretty easily, so that's all right. And then obviously you must meet the health and character requirements. So character, you must be of good character, no imprisonment term or something like that. And then secondly, you must also be healthy. So you can't have any major health issues. If you are, look, a health waiver is available, but that's a completely different ball game altogether. And you'll need to justify, the potential costs you'd cost to the Australian Medicare system. So everything I just mentioned previously, you must have ready prior to application. Everything valid and ready to go at the time of application. So yes, there's a checklist of documents that you will require, that will be required. You know, they're your passport, your identification documents, your work experience document, your qualification documents. And obviously you can bring your dependent family members with you, but that is your dependent, so members of your family unit, your wife, your husband, and your children. They're generally who are members of your family unit. You know, your auntie, your sister, your mother, they're not members of the family unit. Now, this checklist of documents and some of this information is available on my courses page. So you guys can jump over there and have a look as well. Now, if you found that video helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with people who need it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.